And so today we want to continue on with something that we started. My mic is killing me, so you'll forgive me. But today we want to continue with something that we started last week, and it's this idea that nothing is wasted. Because we believe that with God, nothing is wasted, that God can use things in our lives and that we don't have to live a life that is wasted. And I hope that you have had an opportunity to join in the conversation, because we didn't want to stop the conversation just on Sunday when we had the opportunity to talk with you. We want the conversation to continue. We want to have conversations going throughout the week, because here at The Hill, we believe that groups matter, that community matters. We believe that you find freedom when you are in groups of people. And so as you are in groups of people and you are communicating and you are having community with one another, we believe that that is the place that you will find freedom. And so we hope you've had an opportunity to be able to join in one of the conversations. And if you haven't, guess what? This coming up week is a really great week for you to join the conversation. And so we hope that you will do that. But let's continue on this idea of nothing is wasted, because again, we believe that with God, nothing is wasted. And so a lot of us, most of us, all of us have wasted something in our lives. We've had times in our lives that we've wasted probably opportunities that have come our way. We've had opportunities that maybe we didn't take or that we took, and we're like, why did we take that opportunity when we could have taken the other one? And if we're honest, we've probably wasted money, right? Why did I buy that thing? I got it home and was like, I should have taken that thing back as soon as I got out the store. Wasted money. We waste things all the time in our lives, but one of the things that I think that we waste the most is time. And the thing about time, the hardest thing about time is that time is one of those things that you can't get back. You kick yourself because you should have done this in the time that you had, or you should have done that in the time that you had, but you can't get that back. So what do you do with things that you've wasted? Well, when you have money, you can always earn more money, hopefully. With opportunities, there's always going to be an opportunity that comes up next. But with time, how do you get back time that you've wasted? Because that's one of those things that isn't easy to come by. Because with every new day, each and every one of us receives a gift. When the day starts over, the gift that we receive is called 1,440 minutes. And all of us get that same gift that we are alive to receive. It's a gift of time. And the question isn't, do we receive time? The question is, what do we do with our time? What do we do with those 1,440 minutes that we get? Because we have a choice to do something or do nothing with it. We have a choice to use it and redeem it, or we have a choice to waste it. And I wish I could tell you that every time that I got those minutes that I didn't waste them, but more often than not, I find myself wasting them. Time is one of those things that is precious. And in this season that we're in right now, it's interesting because it feels like the time that we're in is so elongated. You can look online, you can look on social media, and I looked just a couple of weeks ago and it said, this is a unique leap year. There was 29 days in February. There was 300 days in March and 5 years in April. And it's just the beginning of May. So let's see where we find ourselves when this is all said and done. But here's the thing. We each receive that same amount of time every single day. And so what will we do with that time? A couple of years ago, I found myself flying home from New York. I was by myself. I was flying from New York to San Francisco. I wish I could tell you it was a direct flight, because that would have been so much easier, but it wasn't. It was a flight that went from New York to Memphis to San Francisco. And as you know, anything that comes into San Francisco is delayed, right? Unfortunately, the delay wasn't on San Francisco's end. It was from wherever the flight was coming from. And when I landed in Memphis, Tennessee, from New York City, I got out of the plane thinking I was just going to make it to the next plane, only to look up at the monitor and it says, your flight has been delayed 4 hours. And I said, you have got to be kidding me. What that means is this. It means that when I get home, it's going to be tomorrow, because it was evening time. And so I said, what am I going to do with 4 hours? Because I'm either going to sit here and watch horrible airport TV, or I can do something with my time. I've always wanted to go to Memphis, Tennessee, because let's be real, I've heard there's some really good barbecue out there. And so I said, let me see what I can do. Even if it's in the airport, airport barbecue in Memphis is probably better than any barbecue anywhere else. And so I said, let me see if I can go find some good barbecue. And so I walked around the terminal, and I didn't look for names. I just followed my nose to see where I could get to. And I found this amazing barbecue place, and I had this heavenly food. Even though it was in the airport, it was phenomenal. And so as I ate the food, I figured, well, this isn't going to take me 4 hours. What am I going to do now? Being the person that I am, I decided I'm going to walk around and see if I can find people to talk to. And so I went to this ice cream spot, and I went up to this lady and I said, may I have whatever it was that they were serving? And she said, sure. I said, tell me, what do you love about Memphis? She said, nothing. It's the most boring city on the planet. I said, what? There's good music here. There's good food here. Are you kidding me? She was like, it's boring. You don't want to stay here. I said, okay, let me move on. And so I moved on, and I went to talk to other people. And as I was walking back to my gate, I still had about 3 hours left, and something hit me. Something in my heart told me that I needed to call this friend that I hadn't spoke to in several months. And I don't know what it was that had passed and why I hadn't spoken to them, but I figured, you know what, I'm going to listen and I'm going to call them. And so I called, and I reached out to my friend, and they picked up the phone, and it was odd because it sounded like they had been crying. And as I was talking to them, I started listening to what they were saying, and what I had come to realize was that they had lost someone very close to them. They were struggling in this season of their life more than they had ever struggled before, because it was someone that was closer than a brother, closer than a best friend. It was someone that was almost like a hero to them. And they lost him, and they didn't know what to do. And so for the next hour and a half, I spent that time talking to my friend, a friend that I hadn't spoken to in years, and got to listen to them. I didn't say much. All I did was just listen to what it was that they had to say. And so they spoke, and I listened, and I heard them. And here's the thing. I had 4 hours. And in those 4 hours, I could have just sat there. I could have done nothing. I would have missed out on some good food. I would have missed out on some interesting conversation with people. And ultimately, I would have missed out on talking to this friend that I hadn't spoken to in such a long time, that needed someone to just hear them. And so in that moment, I realized something. Instead of wasting the time, I had chosen to redeem the time that I had. Because we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to either redeem, waste the time that we've been given. But we have to choose. And so in that moment, I decided that I needed to redeem the time. And here's the thing. All of us have an opportunity to redeem the time that we're in, and the time that we receive, and the time that we get every single day. The question is, what are we going to do with that time? All of us have an opportunity to redeem, but will we? And you may be thinking, I've wasted money. I've wasted opportunities. And I've wasted time. And maybe in this shelter in place that you find yourself in, maybe you're saying, I've even wasted these last 7 weeks. But can I encourage you that you don't have to waste those 7 weeks? That starting in the next 1,440 minutes, you can begin to redeem those last 7 weeks and make it count for something. Because here's the thing, it seems as if this time that we've been in, this long period of time that we have found ourselves in, it feels as if we have been stuck in this waiting period. But I'm here today to tell you that there is purpose in our waiting. That we don't have to be stuck, that we don't have to just waste the time that we've had, but we can actually use the time that we have. That we can actually redeem the time that we have, that we can actually find purpose in our waiting. There's this story in the Old Testament of this man who had a dream. He had this dream that one day he was going to be a king, lead, be in charge. And he was so excited with this dream that he had that he decided he was going to go tell his family. And he went and he told his family about this dream that he had, and they looked at him and they said, so what you're telling me is You're going to be my boss? And they looked at him and they didn't take so lightly to the news that he was going to be in charge. And so they said, okay, let's see. And so they decided to take him and sell him, basically get rid of him, because they said, if we get rid of him, then he won't be ruler over us. So we're going to do whatever we can to get rid of this man. And eventually what ended up happening was they sold him, and it was their brother that they sold him. And he found himself the servant in somebody's house. And while he was in that house, as he was a servant, what he decided to do was say, you know what? I'm not going to waste this time that I have. I'm actually going to do something with this time. And I'm actually going to serve faithfully. And I'm actually going to do something with this time that I've been given. Because he held on to the dream that he had. He recognized that he was in a circumstance, but he said, I'm not going to let go of this dream. I'm actually going to do something with this time. And in Genesis chapter 39, we pick up this story of this man, Joseph. And he was serving in the house of Potiphar. And all of a sudden, as he's faithful, as he's doing everything right, and isn't it interesting that when we are doing everything right, sometimes circumstances happen regardless. And we find ourselves in these places that we never thought we would be in. And it wasn't anything that we did. It was just circumstances happen. And he found himself wrongly accused and put into prison. And in Genesis 39, starting in verse 20, here's what it says. It says, Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And didn't we just sing about that favor? And so the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. And the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. See, Joseph was put into prison. He was put into the king's palace. Underneath the palace was the prison, and he was put in that place, and he was stuck there. And he could have been just like anybody else and said, you know what, I'm a prisoner now. What am I going to do? I got a lot of time on my hands. But what he chose to do was, instead of just wasting that time, was say, you know what, I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to trust God. I'm actually going to do something in this time. And so he remained faithful in that season. And as he was in that season, it said that God showed him favor. And he found himself in a place that he didn't expect. He continued to serve. He continued to be faithful, even though his circumstances did not look like he should have remained faithful, but he chose to do it. And there's something that I believe is important for us today to learn from Joseph's story. There's three things that I believe pulled him through this time that he found himself in. And if we can take those three things and apply it to the season that we find ourselves in, I believe that God will do something in our lives that is beyond what we could even begin to think or imagine. Because again, Joseph in that prison, just like you and I, had 1,440 minutes every single day. But he chose to do something with those minutes. And here are those three things that I believe that it's important for us to remember if we're going to get through this season, if we're going to find ourselves in a place similar to Joseph. See, because it might feel like we're boxed in. It might feel like we are in a season of waiting. It might feel like we're in this place that circumstances aren't what we thought they would be. But if we'll do these things, I believe God can do something in our lives. And the first thing is this, that he remembered that God was faithful. And because he remembered that his God was faithful, he recognized that it didn't matter what circumstance, what situation he found himself in, his God was going to be faithful regardless. And so he held on to that promise and he held on to that hope. God will be faithful. And so as he was faithful in serving God, not because he was faithful, God was just faithful. And he showed him favor. And so in these times that we find ourselves in, will you remember that God is faithful? And as you remember that he is faithful, will you let that in turn make you respond in faithfulness to God? Forgetting that there are circumstances that we're dealing with, because there are circumstances. But if we can remember that God is faithful, we can make it through to the other side. The second thing was that he remembered that God had given him a dream in his heart, and that dream was God's dream, not his dream. And because it was God's dream, and because God is faithful, God was going to make his dream come to pass no matter what it took. Do you recognize that one day Joseph would end up in the palace, second in command, but he had to start underneath the palace? I heard this pastor one time, Pastor Obed Martinez, he said it like this: sometimes God will speak to us from our future, seeing our full picture, knowing what our life looks like, seeing what that life looks like, and speaking to us from where we're going to be, not where we are. And he says, this is the dream that I have for you, and you're going to get to that dream. But guess what? Before you get to that dream, you've got to get there. You've got to walk the steps. You've got to get to that place. You may not be there yet, but I know what there looks like. And so I'm calling you to that place. That place was that palace, and he was just underneath it. See, what Joseph had was a puzzle piece. He didn't have the full picture. He had an idea. He had been given a picture by God way back when, but throughout his circumstances, he was like, how is this picture ever going to come to pass? How is that even going to be possible? And he said, look, I'm going to give you a dream, but in order to get to that dream, I'm going to give you a puzzle piece to build one piece at a time to get to that dream. And God isn't asking us to do anything crazy with the puzzle. He's just saying, build the puzzle. We have one piece. It's piece number 1440. And the question is, what are we going to do with that piece of our puzzle? See, we can be faithful with it, or we can waste it, and we can say, this piece doesn't fit, I'm going to find another one. Or we can take that piece and be faithful with it and put it down and wait for the next piece to be given to us so that we can continue building the puzzle, continue building the picture and the dream that God has for us. Because the dream that God has given us isn't a dream that's going to go away. The question is, what are we going to do with the pieces that we've been given to get to that dream? And so Joseph was faithful because God was faithful. Joseph remembered that God had given him a dream. And even though he found himself underneath the palace where the dream he thought was going to be where he was going to be at, he said, I still got a puzzle piece in my hand. I still got something to play with. And so guess what? I'm going to be faithful with this piece. And eventually God would give him another piece, and he would give him another piece. And every time a piece was given to him, it started creating that dream that God had spoken to him many years before. Because I believe that God speaks to us from where he's calling us, not from where we are. He sees where we're going, and he's just saying, be faithful with what I've given you. And so our question is, with our piece, our 1440, what are we going to do with it? The third thing that I believe that got Joseph through, and I think this is probably one of the greatest things, was that he recognized not only that God was faithful, he recognized that not only was God going to be true to the dream that he had given him, but he recognized this, that nothing was going to change who God was, that God was still going to be up to something. Because God is always up to something. Sometimes we don't see what he's up to, but he's always up to something. And it's our responsibility just to continue walking into what it is that he's up to. And here's what I believe happened. I believe that in that prison, in that place that Joseph found himself, that God was forging inside of him something that was great. God was forging a faith and a resolve in him for something. He was resolving in him something that was going to be useful to him when that next puzzle piece came. See, God was building inside of him a faith, a faithfulness, and a resolve to not give up on God or the dream that he had given him. And I believe that in this season, that God is trying to forge inside of us a faith that will not give up. That he is trying to forge inside of us a faith and something that is so deep, that is preparing us for something that is so much greater on the other side of all of this. But we can't waste that time that we've been given. We can't waste the opportunities that we've been given any longer. Because I believe that God is in the process of forging something deep inside of us, inside of our families, inside of our church, inside of our city. He is forging something inside of us in order to prepare us for what is coming next. And in that prison where Joseph found himself, he was faithful. He listened. He prayed. He believed. And so in this time that we have, in this space that we have found ourselves in, it almost seems like we are boxed in this waiting that we have found ourselves in, because again, this time seems like it is endless. In the waiting, what will we do? Will we allow God to forge deep inside of us the faith that He has called us to? Will we allow God to forge something so deep in us that is going to prepare us for something that is so much greater than what we ever saw before? Or will we waste the time? See, here's the thing. We have an opportunity in front of us to redeem the time that we have been given. And can I encourage you today that if the last 7 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it's been at this point, if you feel like they have been wasted, tomorrow's a brand new 1440. Today is a brand new 1440. Redeem it. Use it. Be faithful. Stick to that dream that God has put inside of your heart. Allow Him to forge something so deep inside of you that you can't help but contain it. Allow God to do something in you that is going to prepare you for what is next, because I believe that God is doing something new, but it's in this time right now that it's up to us to forge that inside of us so that when that new comes, we'll be ready to take it by force and not stand back and miss what God is doing. Because let me tell you something, it is easy to miss what God is doing if we haven't taken the time to prepare for what He's getting ready to do. And so we have to be in this place where we are willing to spend time praying. We are willing to spend time in His book. We are willing to spend time joining in on conversation, finding community, talking to one another, building each other up, preparing ourselves for what He's going to do next. Because what I believe He's going to do next is going to be far greater than what we've seen in our past. But what will we do with the time that we've been given? What will we do with the time that we find ourselves waiting in? Because it feels like we're just waiting. But I believe that there is purpose in our waiting. See, Jesus, right before He ascended into heaven, He was having a meal with His followers, and He sat down with them. In Acts chapter 1, verse 4, here's what it says. It says, on one occasion, while He, Jesus, was eating with them, He gave them this command: do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father promised, which you have heard me speak about. Jesus said He had something for them. But first, they had to wait. I believe that God has something for us. But first, we have to wait. We have to wait and find purpose in our waiting, and not waste our waiting, but find purpose in what it is that He is doing in this season of waiting. Because what we find in that season of waiting, what we do with that season of waiting, will allow us to receive the promise and the gift that God has for us. In context of what He was saying in that space right there, He was saying, wait, because the Holy Spirit is coming. And guess what? The Holy Spirit is here. Now it's our turn to wait for whatever that next thing that God is doing for us. And so God is saying this to us today. Go wait, but be prepared, because there is something so big coming that if you ain't ready, you might just fall over. I was having dinner with a friend. We were actually in Florida at the beginning of this year, and we were having dinner, getting ready to have dinner, and we were going to grill some steaks. Apparently, I like meat. And we're getting ready to grill some steaks, and we were getting everything ready, and my friend was turning his barbecue on. And I don't have luck with barbecues, apparently, but we were getting food ready. And as we were getting the food ready, he said, hey, will you go inside and go tell them we're just about ready for the meat? And I was like, cool, got it. But prior to me going inside, he was trying to light the grill and it wasn't working. And so I went inside and I was literally inside for 2 seconds. And he comes walking in the door and his face is glazed over. His eyes are as big as the moon. And the hair on his face was singed off. The hair on his arms was singed off. The next morning, we found out that even the hair in his nose was burnt. And the reason why I share that story is because he was not prepared for what blew in his face. He got down to check on the grill, and the gas grill exploded and caught on fire. And he said it was such a wave that pushed him that he fell on his back. And everything around him was on fire. I came outside and there wasn't much left on fire. But as I went outside, it got me to thinking that is just like the season that we find ourselves in. He was waiting for this grill to light, and he wasn't prepared for what was coming, and it knocked him over. And if we are not prepared for what is coming, we may just get knocked over. And so in this season of waiting, it is our time to be prepared for what God is doing, for that gift that he is trying to bestow upon us. That favor that we sung about, that he is going to be sending our way. If we aren't prepared, we won't be able to hold on to it. And so what are we doing in our waiting? Because there is nothing wasted with God. And so this time that we have, we can either waste it or we can redeem it. We can take those 1,440 minutes that we have been given and do something with them, or we can waste them and regret them. And if you've wasted them and regretted them up to this point, I challenge you, don't waste them anymore. Do something with them. Make memories. Let me tell you something. Over the last 7 weeks, I have done more crazy things in my house than I can ever begin to even comprehend that I've done. We've slid down the stairs. I don't know why I am still standing. We cut each other's hair. I mean, we have done all kinds of crazy things, but the reason why is because we said we're not going to waste this time that we've been given. We are going to make memories. We are going to chronicle this time that we've had. Why? Because we want to redeem this time and not waste this time. And so let me challenge you with your families. Will you make memories? With your families, will you choose not to waste the time that you've been given? Whatever it is that you've been given in this season, please don't waste it. Use it wisely, because these are moments and these are minutes that we will never get back. Our kids will remember one day. Remember that time that we had to do school from home? And when we talk about it, they're going to say, I never said I can't wait to get back to school. But yet right now, that's what they're saying. And so we're documenting and we're chronicling all of those things. Why? Because this is historic. And when we get to the other side and we look back on history, we'll say, wow, God did something great in that season because he was preparing us for this one that we're in now. And so this week, join the conversation, redeem the time, make memories, draw close to God, find yourself in a place where you are forging what God is doing deep inside of you, and don't waste it. Because can you imagine with me, just for a moment, when we look back 2 years, 1 year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, a generation from now, we look back and we see all that God is doing in that season. And it's all because what we started in this one. It's all because what we chose to do in this one. It's all starting because we chose to be faithful with the puzzle piece that we were given in this season. And so don't give up on the dream that God has given you just because our circumstances are crazy. Don't give up on that dream. Keep pushing forward because the God that you serve is able. He is faithful. He can do things. We just got to remember that He is faithful, that He is able, that He wants to pour His favor out on us. We have to remember that, and we have to not forget the dream. And we have to know that in this season of waiting, that God wants to forge something deep, deep, deep inside of us. Something that is going to propel us into what is coming. So you'll be given 1,440 minutes. What will you do with it? What will I do with it? What will we do with it? Because we can redeem it or we can waste it. But with God, nothing is wasted. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you that in this season that we find ourselves in, though it seems like it is a time that is just going on forever, and it seems like it's a time that even is pointless. God, will you help us to see that there is purpose in our waiting? God, that there is purpose in what it is that we are doing. Will you help us to know that in this season of waiting, your promises are still true. You are still faithful. The dreams that you have planted inside of our hearts can still come to pass. We have a puzzle piece. God, will you help us to be faithful with the piece that you have given us? Will you help us to prepare ourselves for what is coming next? Because what is next is greater than what has passed. And God, I believe that as we are faithful with our puzzle piece, that your favor will be upon us and our families to 1,000 generations. God, will you remind us that in this time that we find ourselves in, you are trying to forge something deep inside of us. Will you forge a faith in us that is immovable? Will you forge something in us that is not fearful, but that is understanding that you are still up to something, and what you are up to is good, and that you are preparing us for what is next. God, you are preparing us to bring more people into your kingdom, because that is what it's ultimately about, is about people coming to know you and your kingdom. And even today, if there's any of us that would feel like we don't know who you are, if there are any of us who don't feel like we have redeemed the time, but that we've wasted the time, God, will you let us know that we aren't too far gone, that you can still bring us close, that you can still do something new in us. God, even today, even right now, wherever we find ourselves, will you speak to our hearts in this moment? Will you change us? Because only you can change us. Lord, we believe you. We trust you. God, will you help us to redeem this time that we have and prepare us for what is new? Forge something deep in us, Lord, we pray. We cry out, God, do something new in us. Forge it deep inside of us. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.